What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you 5 of my favorite boss fights in gaming. Now, I'm going to level with you. I recently finished Dragon's Dogma, and like 90% of the reason I made this video was so I could talk about one specific fight from that game outside the context of a review. Now, that said, major spoilers for Dragon's Dogma, Baldur's Gate 1, Vampire, and Underrail. There is a 5th game as well, of course, but not so much spoilers for that one, which is the one we'll start with. And it is none other than the Playful Darkness from Wrath of the Righteous. Now, like a great many bosses and a great many video games, the Playful Darkness really isn't that hard if you know what you're doing and you know what it is. You see, the Playful Darkness is a monster type known as a Death Snatcher. And while they themselves are not explicitly undead, they are, however, a monster with negative energy affinity, as they very much so practice a great deal of necromancy and that type of thing. However, this leaves them with a gigantic weakness of being weak to cure spells, which you might not realize at first because this is not a monster that characteristically looks undead. However, if you have that knowledge, the fight is very simple, and you basically just need to throw up summons to distract it, because if it gets melee hits on you, it's gonna hurt. And then from there, it's pretty easy to just take the thing down with standard healing spells. Furthermore, though, with Playful Darkness in particular, actually, you meet him long before you need to fight him, so to speak. You can find him at the end of Act 3, but you can actually come all the way back here in Act 5 and kill it then, when it's a very easy fight. But nonetheless, big favorite of mine because it kind of blindsides you. It uses a monster type not a lot of people are familiar with, and overall I just thought it was very cool. Next on our list, we have Tchort from Underrail, and this is primarily because this boss is ridiculous. It can, again, like a great many games, be incredibly easy or very hard depending on the build you went through the game with, but Tchort itself is a very interesting creature, and there's a ton of lore behind it and how it's constantly evolving, basically. But on top of some builds just being able to wipe this thing out, there's actually a very complicated puzzle that you can solve to trivialize the boss fight in a lot of ways, especially if you're a build that's going to have trouble with it. But basically, it's this giant eye thing, and it has all these tentacles, and it seems to have a very strange agenda because Tchort is actually helping a faction in the Underrail, and they're using their knowledge of what Tchort is to expand human life expectancy, etc. And overall, it's just a very bizarre, strange boss fight, and I was a big fan of it. Third on the list, we have the Blood Queen from Vampire. Now, Blood Queen is, of course, a bit of a visual spectacle, but more than that, she is also really cool mechanically. So if you're unaware of how Vampire works, depending on the amount of people you kill throughout your playthrough, the game will be harder or easier for you. If you choose to abstain from killing civilians, etc., other enemies will be higher level than you and the game will be harder. However, what you don't realize is that if you yourself kill a bunch of civilians to gain experience, you're actually making the final boss fight much harder, because the Blood Queen scales in power directly with how many civilians you killed throughout your playthrough. So despite killing as many of them as possible even, she will always be a certain amount stronger than you. And this increases by how many people you've killed. So again, this fight is easier or difficult depending on how many people you killed. But furthermore, it is actually a fight that is trivialized either way with the use of a Liston knife. This will effectively let your character soak up blood points to activate your powers, which will just let you constantly use your abilities against her, which you would normally run out of. But a Liston knife allows you to soak up blood from an enemy by essentially stabbing and bleeding them out. But the Blood Queen has an infinite supply of blood, so it's very easy to just refill that way, which trivializes the boss fight regardless of how you approached it. And then second to last, we have Sarevok from Baldur's Gate 1. Your twisted ball spawn brother, or half-brother anyway, seeking to rise to the throne of the Lord of Murder. But more than anything, I really enjoy this boss fight, specifically on Legacy of Bald, because of the lead-up that went into me actually fighting the guy. Because on that difficulty, he's actually the least dangerous thing in the room. There's actually a bunch of ads in the room as well, which on that difficulty are much more of a pain, and you often have to kind of single some of them out and kill them before you kill Sarevok. And it's just a very challenging tactical fight that there's a few different strategies for, to be honest, but overall that was an experience I just found incredibly rewarding. and a fantastic way to end Baldur's Gate 1. But that of course brings us to Dragon's Dogma, and the main reason I made this video was the fight with the dragon in Dragon's Dogma. Now this giant red evil dragon is of course trying to lay waste to the land, and it is your job as the Arisen to track him down and fight him. Although I will say it got a little ridiculous when I realized his name was Gregory, which is just a little anticlimactic when you learn his name. But that said, the boss fight itself is intense because it is of course a very large dragon and you are but a small person. The fight itself is multi-phased. He will chase you through a corridor that you have to run away from him in. This will lead to a fight with his head when he kind of gets stuck in a hallway, so to speak, and then this leads to a sort of gauntlet across some ramparts. Then there's a section where you're flying on his back and you gotta stab him. It ends in an arena of sort where you get a proper boss battle with the guy, which largely revolves around you trying to hit his heart and his chest, which is his weak point because he won't take a lot of damage otherwise if you can even hit him at all, which of course revolves around avoiding all of his fire attacks, which can be a bit challenging if you are not a mage or an archer, as melee characters might have a hard time actually reaching his heart without climbing him, but even if you climb him because of the positioning of his heart, it can be a little hard to hit it then either. So it's definitely a fight where team composition matters, and overall, I just really loved the spectacle of this boss fight. It takes quite some time. I think in total, this was probably like a 10-minute plus fight for me, at least on my first experience with it, and I honestly thought it was a fantastic climax to a very interesting game where you fight a lot of large monsters like this, but they really went out of their way to make you feel like such a stronger character after Gregory here had ripped your heart out on the beach when you first met him, and now you finally killed him after this epic battle. And honestly, I was a little blown away with how much they put into this boss fight, which is why I wanted to make this video and talk about it a little more than I was able to in the review. But there you go, guys, 5 of my favorite boss fights in video games. However, there are of course tons more, and these were in no particular order as gaming is rife with awesome encounters. So by all means, if you have some favorites yourself, let me hear about them down in the comment section below, which of course means like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.